Hi, kitty cats. I am Amethyst Herrick, your hostess for Gender Identity Weekly, a weekly discussion about identity and gender from the contributors and guests of the Purple Paw Publications website, genderidentitytoday.com. This content right here is brought to you by subscribers of genderidentitytoday.com. So, if you are already a subscriber, first of all, thank you so much for your ongoing support. You know very well that every subscriber not only receives new content directly into their email inboxes as soon as it's published on the website, but you're also able to interact with every contributor directly, which includes me. And hell, I want to interact with me. Why not? So, if you would like to support shows just like this one, as well as all the other podcasts, videos, and written articles by our contributors, please consider subscribing using the links you're going to find down there in the show notes. All right, today I am super excited to be speaking with Bob Martin. Hi, Bob.
Hi.
I feel like I was in on a Newhart show there for a moment, being able to go, "Hi, Bob." Channeled my inner Suzanne Plachette. So Bob is a criminal trial lawyer, also a meditation teacher, and an author. Bob's most recent book is called I Am the Way, and I find this fascinating. It's a recasting of Chinese divination, I Ching, in Christian terminology, which is super cool because you know how I love esoteric stuff. So that's why you and I are talking, Bob. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Cool. No, I think it'll be fun. I always love hearing sort of early stories because, I love talking about identity. I've read your background, but can you tell us a little bit about early life for you?
So, my folks were Eastern European immigrants. My dad was Hungarian royalty, actually, and
Nice.
all of his. My dad was born in 1898. Just to give you a time frame of my life, I was born in 1950. So my dad, his family was wiped out by the Bolsheviks in the early 20th century when they invaded Hungary after the Russian Revolution and the Russian Communist Revolution. My mom was Roma Gypsy, and if you know anything about the Romas, pretty much everybody wiped them out. So I don't really have any ancestors or ancestral history to look back on, and the lack of that, I think, is always. I think the lack of that's always been a part of my identity. But even more so, my first number of years, we were in a carnival. My dad's and my mom's discovery of how to make the American dream come true for them was through popcorn and cotton candy. So we had the popcorn and cotton candy trailer in the carnival. Later on, we elevated our life from carnival to amusement park, and I grew up kind of selling hot dogs on the boardwalk in Rockaway's Playland, Queens, New York.
Sure.
Also spent some time in Miami, Florida, doing county fairs. And because my folks had, the history of losing so many of their family members, they really, the idea of spirit or spirituality or religion just wasn't a conversation that we had in my house. We just I wouldn't call them atheists or agnostics, but more non-theists. And so I grew up in that atmosphere. I was a chubby little boy. And in those days, we called it husky. And
Sure.
J.C. Penney was the only store that carried clothes made for chubby little boys.
So I remember that, just so as you know.
Right?
Didn't they had a whole line called Huskies, right?
Husky, yeah. Okay. And my mom used to walk me into the J.C. Penney's. I'm holding her hand, and she had this shrill voice, and she would go, "Where's the Husky department?" To my deathly embarrassment.
Of course.
And so being that way, they did the clothes didn't fit well. because they hadn't come up with how to tailor for larger folks. Everything was designed for the svelte athletic body. And so what happened is that cloth kept riding up between my thighs, and I'd have to like pull it out. And so the girls, when I started going to regular school, the girls all thought I had cooties, and so they called me cooties and run away whenever I came near. So that was. I did have an ally, though. I had a friend, Charlie Greenfield, who always stood up for me. And I think that later on in life, I came to understand how Charlie understood the power of the group and groupthink, and because he saw how devastating that was to me. And so he, he concentrated on his piano playing and his studies and the like. And I didn't understand why he didn't seem to care about being accepted as I did for so many years until my second year of college. I might add, under the influence of one of those things that we were doing back in the 70s, psychedelics. All of a sudden, it occurred to me how important Charlie was in my life. And I called him up at 3:00 in the morning. He was in college in New York. And I told him all about it. And he said, okay, thanks, Bob. Can I go back to sleep now? And a few days later, I got a handwritten letter from him. He wrote a short story about all of these girls who used to make fun of me. And I don't know why I'm going on with this particular story, but all these girls that used to make fun of me. And I went into an ice cream parlor in Boston. That's where I was in college. And they were all Pam and Dee and all those girls. They were there. And they're talking and pointing at me and laughing. And all of a sudden, the doors flew open and the cootie walked in, that plastic toy. And they all screamed and ran out of the ice cream parlor. And I was fascinated, and our eyes locked on each other. And then the cootie started to melt, and it boiled into a plastic puddle, which eventually just evaporated and disappeared. And the cootie was gone. And in fact, at that point, the cootie was gone. Yeah, that letter just meant an awful lot to me.
I bet.
So fast forward, I became a lawyer, and I worked for the DA's office in Miami. Janet Reno was my boss. Some of your older audience may know who she was. And I rose up in the office. I advanced pretty far. I was head of a couple of divisions, and we hit the mob for a lot of money. And shortly after that, I left the office, and then the head of the Italian branch of the Miami mob came to visit me. And it was a little bit unnerving when he walked into my office and sat down, and he goes, well, you hit us for a lot of money. You got to be good. We want to send you some clients. So I in effect became a mob lawyer, not like consigliere, but I just was
presumably,
just taking referrals and clients, and they always paid well, and they always paid in cash. And I was going out and hanging out with these guys, the Colombians, the Haitians, the Cubans, and I was partying too much. And my whole life was kind of my personal life. My professional life, I was able to maintain stable. Never had any problems there. But my personal life was starting to fall apart. And so I was seeing a therapist. And I came to a very important crossroads where I had to decide whether I was going to continue in this vein and look out for money and fame, or I didn't know what. What should I do, George? What should I do? So he picked up some coins And he started throwing those coins and making numerical calculations and drawing little lines on a paper. And somehow it all arrived at a number 32. And he reached into it, a book, opened it up to chapter 32. And the name of the chapter was Retreat.
Okay.
And I was paying him $65 an hour to be my therapist. I thought throwing coins was a little weird. So
your mom might have thought it was pretty great, though, if she had a gypsy background,
right. So I cursed him out and left, but the word was stuck in my consciousness.
Sure.
And I put the brakes on, and I stopped doing the things. And as we say in the rooms, NA rooms, I started making my amends. And that I found out that my therapist was actually the English language editor for Master I Ching, who was a 72nd, think about that, 72nd generation Taoist master monk from the Shaolin Temple. And so I asked him, about it, the I Ching and Taoism. And it was great. It was like somebody all of a sudden had given me an operating manual for how to live life. And I'd never gotten before. It gave me a North Star. And so Master Ni came to Miami, and I studied. We had a little Taoist group. And I studied under Master Ni and George for 8 years, and became pretty much a Taoist. Then ran into some problems with my mob clients. They asked me to do some stuff I wasn't willing to do.
Oh.
And decided I'd move to North Carolina, and Johnny and I shook hands and parted friends, and that was all good. And so I was given this wonderful opportunity to start my life completely over. I was leaving Miami, and I had, studied a new philosophy of life for 8 years, and so now I had the chance to recreate my life. And I dedicated myself from then on to public service and healing and the like, and meditated, developed a really consistent practice, went back for a very intense 2 years of training to become a meditation teacher in the Tibetan tradition. Later on, found some real great stuff at Duke University, where they had westernized the way of teaching meditation. So I got certified at Duke in that school of meditation. And that's what I started writing and writing poems, and I wrote a novel. And I've dedicated myself to making a difference in people's lives. And the best part of my life, I guess the thing that I'm most proud of, is that there are people that come up to me now and say, my life was different after I met you.
That is a beautiful story. I have a few follow-up questions.
Sure.
First of all, shout out to Charlie Greenfield. Thank you, Charlie, for being the person you are. Mm-hmm. Right? What happened to Charlie? Actually,
Charlie became a food editor in Miami.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and wrote, and he's been published in the Atlantic and some other papers. Then he became a travel editor and married Priscilla, and they traveled and reported on it. And now he is retired and fishing in Miami. And I always see a picture on Facebook of him with these big old mahi-mahis and groupers and stuff.
Sure. That's awesome. I love that story. I'm curious too, because you went into the legal field. We were talking earlier about how you were a defense attorney as well. Mm-hmm. Did some of that occur do you think because of your early treatment? I don't know how else to put that.
Yeah, yeah.
The way you were treated by the kids. Yeah.
That's an interesting point. Now, think on that. Yeah, I think that it opened me up to understanding what it feels like to be accused and what it
Ooh,
feels like to
yeah.
be the brunt of other people's meanness.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so, folks that don't have those experiences, that live entitled lives, that, have, it's hard. They have to work harder to develop compassion, I think,
Yes.
than
Yeah.
those of us who have gone through through the through have passed through those kinds of
Right.
experiences. Um,
Right.
I think the other thing, though, that probably caused me to be a lawyer is that I read To Kill a Mockingbird when I was 14 years old, and I fell
Sure.
in love with Atticus Finch. And I didn't. It was only recently that I kind of put two and two together and said that was probably had something to do with it.
Oh, sure. Sure. It's the reason why every Halloween, that book is the reason why every Halloween I consider dressing up as a ham because of Scout, right,
Scout,
who
right,
dresses up as a
right,
ham. So
right. Mm-hmm.
for some reason that line always sticks out of my head. That just goes, "It was Halloween and I was a ham." I'm sorry, what? Was
Yeah,
that
right.
common in those days that you just was going to dress up as a chicken? I'm going to dress up as an egg. Many other livestock products, including, I don't know. Maybe it was typical. So you were, but you were you said you were in Florida in the 1980s, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I
Okay.
moved to North Carolina in the end of the 80s.
Okay. Okay. Dumb question. Did you have like the peach suit and the like the t-shirt under like Sonny Crockett? I can see it right
Uh,
now just looking at you with the whole
no, but I did have a colleague that looked like Colonel Sanders.
no, that's
He
very different.
he had the white suit, and the white shirt and the bow tie and the little goatee and
No, I'm thinking, Crockett and
yeah,
Tubbs.
yeah,
I was
yeah.
hoping, something better than Colonel Sanders.
Mm-hmm.
But that's cool too. Let's run with that. We'll run with it. It's like famous adjacent is what it is.
Right,
Colonel
right.
Sanders, Sonny. Well, anyway. Crap. I had a better question. Then, oh, I do. You in your background, you mentioned that there was, and you started talking too. There was some drug use, and
Mm-hmm.
you had started the business. I'm assuming the business actually was. So you were representing mafia people. Was that the business?
Yeah, I was a criminal defense attorney. I mean,
Okay.
that's where my clients came from, for the
Okay.
most part.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there was. It seems when we have these moments where there's a huge inflection point, it's because you've hit some bottom.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Uh-huh.
what was that bottom? Was it drug use? I mean, what
Mm-hmm.
you glossed over it a little bit, and if you
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
want
yeah.
to
No, no, no.
tell the
That's
whole
fine.
story,
That's
it's
fine.
cool. But
No, that's fine. There was my wife. So I was snorting cocaine, and then
mm,
one day I was out weeding plants, and I was bending over a lot. And the next day I woke up and my hamstrings, I pulled and ripped my hamstring, and it was
oh
really,
gosh,
really painful. So I went to the doctor and he gave me a Percocet. And I took that Percocet and the pain in my leg went away. But not only the pain in my leg, all my pain went away.
oh
Every,
sure,
I mean, it was like all of my anxiety, all of my fear, everything had just gone away. And that just left an impression on me that I wanted more. So eventually, over time, there came a time when I was pretty badly addicted to it. Not only that,
okay,
not only that, but my wife was alcoholic and my daughter was anorexic. And
Oh
so
gosh.
you can imagine the chaos that was going on in the family. So,
Yeah.
and also, cocaine has an effect on you that makes you think that you're Superman and that you can't be beat and that you're just as
Mm.
arrogant as can be. And so I was going in and investing in all these businesses that were going to make me $1 million. By the time I was 32, I had
Okay.
already paid off my house, thanks to my clients.
Wow.
And I had already paid off my house. And so what I was asking George about was, in order to continue these crazy investments that I was making, I would have to refinance my house and continue to feed the bleed. And
Yeah.
that was what I asked him what I should do. And that's where I got the
Oh.
retreat. And that's where I pulled back. And that's why things were saved. But
Yeah.
yeah, things were were pretty. There may have been a little bit more that I could have fallen. I could have lost my career. I could have
Mm,
lost my
true.
law license. I could,
Yeah.
but I didn't fall that far. I was able to stop right before that.
That's good. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Your initial response to divination was not positive.
No.
Has that's changed now? Are you
Oh
do
yeah.
you
I
regularly? Okay.
the I Ching was, I mean, other than reading the Taoist practices and doing Tai Chi and Qigong, physical
Yeah.
practices and the contemplative practices that are associated with Taoism, the I Ching is a book which you could look at it from a couple of different ways. Now, it is a book of divination, and its roots go way back to Chinese shamanism.
Okay.
But then, now you got to remember that I grew up in a non-deist family, so it's a little hard for me to step out of the idea that if I can't see it, touch it, or feel it, it doesn't exist.
Sure.
Okay, so I was a little suspect of the I Ching, but then I found
Sure.
that Carl Jung, the famous psychotherapist, had
Yeah.
written a couple of really fascinating examinations and reflections on the I Ching. And his explanation of it was something that I could buy. As I used it,
I
I
see.
found that there was something that you can only describe as magical about it. But when I
Hmm.
first started, I accepted Carl Jung's explanation, and what he described it as a bridge between the intuitive and verbal mind. He said, if you ask a question like, "What do I need to know about today's job interview?" And then you throw the coins and make the mathematical calculations and draw the lines and the like, what you're doing is you're occupying your rational mind. You're tying it up so that it can't interfere and take over
Sure.
your intuitive mind. And it allows your intuitive mind to work on the answer to the question, which you already really know the answer. You really already, your internal intelligence already knows what the answer is.
Sure.
Over time, I have begun to believe in a universal intelligence that we're connected to, and it opens up a doorway to that intelligence. But then what Jung said was we need some way of taking the intuitiveness and translating it into words so that we can effectuate it in the world. And what happens is that when you read the answer that you're directed to by the numbers that you've come up with, your eyes are picking out those words that your intuition wants to tell your verbal brain. And so
Hmm.
you really craft the answer and make verbal that which you already knew to be true. But what it teaches you is it teaches you how to recognize the energy in the environment that you're in. And
Yeah.
then it gives you the advice of how to align yourself with that energy so that we become masterful in life. the best example I could give you is, have you ever been talking to somebody and you just sense that they're not listening to you, or they're dismissing what you have to say?
All the time.
All the time, right?
I think it's me, but
Right.
we'll see.
So there are 64 chapters in the I Ching, and one of those chapters is called obstruction. So if you were in that situation, you would sense that you're in a time of obstruction. And what the I Ching advises you to do in the time of obstruction is to not push against it, because you won't make any headway. And so instead of trying to push and force yourself against the obstruction and overcome it, simply withdraw and use the time to prepare, because the I Ching will tell you that the time will change and that the ears will open up, and there will come a time when people are more willing to listen to you. So you want to be in the best position possible when that time occurs. So use the time to prepare how you're going to present it so that you can do it in an effective and efficient way. Kind of like swimming in to shore. When the tide is with you, you want to swim like heck. But when the time's against you, you don't want to waste your energy fighting it, but you don't want to go back. So you just hold your place. Then you go forward and hold your place, and go forward and hold your place. So the I Ching counsels that you can live life like that. And that's why you see people practicing Tai Chi. They go forward and they come back and go forward. So that's the physical sensation of how to deal with the ever-changing ebb and flow of life. Kind of in a nutshell.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, perfect example, because usually when I see somebody isn't speaking to me, I do withdraw. I mean, usually I kick them in the shin and run, but it's a sense of withdrawal. I mean, I'm going away anyway. But I love how you brought up Jung, because I think using Jung is a great. I'm not trying to diminish what you said. It's a great way of making divination sort of palatable for Western society, because we do need to touch and see and feel everything. And if we go, I can't touch or see that, then we struggle with it.
Right.
Because Jung also wrote voluminously about the tarot as well, which is more my familiarity. More what I've done in Western esoteric tradition. But I had a point. Where was I going to go with that? It's probably a good one too. Oh, I do remember where I was going to go. There was a great description you made. I'm curious too, because you said you've come to accept there is sort of a greater intelligence, an intelligence of the universe, and I know that's a sort of a key tenet of Taoism, right? That the Tao is, I call it the current of the universe.
The current, yes, absolutely, the current.
Okay, wait, is that really the translation?
No, it's the way.
Oh, okay. Oh, right. I was going to say, right. So I think of it as the current that the universe has. And I guess I think, it's great to make this palatable for a Western audience. And at the same time, I just go, what if it's just magic? Like, what if we don't have to explain it. We just go, oh gosh, I got some great insight there. I'm going to go and live my life. I think that was going to be my point, but it's beautiful how we can introduce that to a Western audience by saying, look, you're tapping into something that's part of you already. So, so thank you. I appreciate all of that. Do you use I Ching frequently or regularly?
So yeah, it's a great question. So I threw the coins every morning for 8 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And the question that I asked every morning was simply, what do I need to know about today?
Yes.
And I would read it. And over the years, I came to make muscle memory out of the 64 times. There's a time to punch through. There's a time to wait. There's a time to wait with calculation. There's a time to retreat. There's a time to advance, and the like. And so they became more like a part of just my being. If you practice with it enough, it becomes part of who you are. So, so most of the time, in my daily goings on, I'll be in a situation and I'll kind of recognize the time, and the way to align appropriately with it is just kind of part of who I am. Now, when I am confronted with some difficulty, that is perplexing to me, when I feel like, I'm a little stymied by something or perplexed, I'll grab the book and throw the coins, and it generally will just, settle me down and put me right again.
I think that's great. And I understand what you're saying. I mean, I've used enough tarot now that sometimes I'll walk, I'll go into something and I'll go, oh, well, this is like an Eight of Swords kind of affair,
Right, exactly. And then that when it's an Eight of Swords type of affair, that there's a certain way to deal with that that's more effective and efficient than you would have otherwise dealt with it if you hadn't identified it as that time.
Yes. And I think that's the magical part, to me anyway. That the ability to is sort of a stepping back to be able to see, well, what's the bigger picture that's going on here. But if I remember correctly, and help me out, because again, I'm no expert in Taoism, that is the point of Taoism, right? Is to be able to see everything as to see a holistic view of things. Am I representing that okay?
Yeah. In the Tao Te Ching, it says the Tao created the male and the female, and the interaction of the male and the female created the 10,000 things.
Okay.
And I always think that it's helpful to understand yin and yang a little bit better than we normally do it, because we have a tendency to place judgments on yin and yang. I mean, yin is white and yang is dark. So we have a judgment that dark is bad and light is good.
Sure.
The dark is female and the white is male. So why does the male get the white and why does the female get the dark?
Sure.
And, there's all these judgments that we have about it, but and it is true that we place a negative sign on the yin and a positive sign on the yang, so that if you were going to be misogynistic and sexist, you could say, well, men are, according to Taoism, the superior because they're positive, they're light, and etc.
Sure.
But what most folks don't realize is that negative and that positive really signify the same thing that a negative and positive on a battery signify. They're just simply poles, and we have to distinguish them because without the poles, current can't run.
Right. You're talking to an electrochemist too, so thank you so much for bringing that out. But
right. So if you don't put the judgment as bad on the negative, but it's just that side of the battery and this is this side of the battery, and you need the two of them to flow. If you can take that concept and start to apply it to the whole male-female thing, the yin-yang thing, the day-night thing, you begin to realize that, the back can't exist without front. Tall can't exist without short, all of these things. Male can't exist without female. And it's the interplay that exists between them that creates everything, either in the magical world that's beyond our senses or in the physical world as well.
Yeah.
And the extremes at either end. I mean, if you're too yin, then you're scattered and can't get anything done. And if you are too yang, then your fangs are dripping with blood and all you want to do is go to war. Neither of those two are particularly helpful.
Right.
But both are needed to moderate the other. I mean, there is the healing effect that we have, and then there is the, more assertive energies that we have. And one can't really exist in any kind of helpful way without being moderated by the other.
Yeah. Yes. Agreed. I want to. You've used the words male and female, and I get,
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious. I'm curious if that's how the if I mean if that's how the original Chinese was written as because the reason
Oh,
I'm asking
yes.
this, yes, okay, because I would have
Oh, yes.
guessed masculine and feminine, not male and
Oh,
female. So
oh,
aspects
I
as
see
opposed
what you're
to
saying. I don't know. I don't know the
okay,
answer to
all
that.
right. I ask because using male and female would be allegorical, right? Because I mean
Mm-hmm.
if the yin is an activating, a directing, an initiating, and then the yang is a receiving and a completing and a nurturing.
Other way. Other way.
Oh, I'm sorry, I got them backwards. Oopsie daisies.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
I always so the thing. See, I always fall into Western things that you always say man and women, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because yin is the feminine. Do I have that
Is
right?
the feminine. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. So I always fall into the Western trap of I always think you say yin and yang, so that must mean men and women. Oops, no, backwards.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So sorry, taking it back.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
No, no, no problem.
but it'd be allegorical because you can at least go, well, if you look at reproduction, human reproduction, we would say, the men of the men in the relationship, there's an initiation of pregnancy, and then he goes off and does whatever it is men do. I don't know anymore because right, I was never in that. But then the woman has to spend 9 months going, okay, I've got to finish this. So certainly male and female is allegorical, but yeah,
Mm-hmm.
my understanding of yin and yang is feminine and masculine anyway, and maybe that's my own putting gender where sex should not be.
Yeah,
But
I think, I think that on an evolutionary basis, because the male body was evolved. I mean, there were two main functions that were necessary for human beings to survive.
sure,
One of them was to gather food and protect, and one of them was to take care of the details and the babies, because the
right,
babies needed such a long period of care
yes,
that you had to have some kind of organizational system to take care of them for years. I mean, babies
sure,
need years. I mean, a doe, inside of 4 months is up and running.
right,
We're not.
no,
It's Cobra is ready to kill, on birth. We're not.
mm,
So we in order to survive, we had to have an organizational, healing, caring aspect to who we are as humans, but we also had to have a protection, food gathering, and one of them needed more muscular strength than the other.
sure,
And so the kind of so we evolved as male and female genders. But I think that the Chinese assigned the concept of masculinity and femininity because in males, in men, there tends to be, and I'm not,
sure,
and these are, there tends to be a bit more of that energy that's related to their muscular strength
sure,
than there is in the female body. And the female body has a bit more organizational, come together, connecting. The female brain generally, if I understand it correctly, has about 14% more of its brain space devoted to communication than the male brain does. So evolutionary, we were designed to have these different kinds of energies for different kinds of functions, both of which were necessary for survival.
yeah,
And I think that the Chinese simply assigned those characteristics that tend to predominate in the male body because of its
sure,
muscular creation. And of course, today's world, it's very different. I mean, you don't have to be stronger in order to operate a keyboard,
Right.
and
Right.
and so we may be entering a time when what we call the female energy, which is organizational and connection more oriented towards that may be what's necessary for leadership in this very diverse world right now. This may be the time that female energy, and that's totally consistent with Taoist thinking, where everything is in flux and everything is cyclical, so that there are times in history where that which we call masculine energy is necessary to predominate. And then there are those times when the feminine energy is
Sure.
necessary
Sure.
in order to bring us back into balance. Um, so it's an interesting interplay. But I thank you for asking me that question, because I never really considered that profoundly as you just
Mm.
stimulated my thinking. Thank you so
Well,
much.
oh, sure. I mean, obviously there's kind of a thing going on in Western society right now about, is there a distinction between sex and gender? And the major distinction is not, is not physical. Because,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at least scientifically, sex only has to do with reproduction, but gender has also a behavioral, social part of it. And so I would say, if you were, I don't know in Chinese society, but like if you look at Norse society, certainly Celtic society, the best warriors were the ones who protected, not the men. And so, certainly
Mm-hmm.
you can look at Norse, Norse mythology. The Valkyries were agents of Odin, right? And Odin
Mm-hmm.
chose them because they were excellent warriors.
Mm-hmm.
They'd be able to determine who else was an excellent warrior, and so that's why they would go to the battlefield to pick up the souls of those who had fallen, to take them to Valhalla. Not like I'm an expert on Norse stuff, sorry, but the point being that that's why I wanted to pick at that, because it's like it's not male. What it is somebody is what you were saying, the characteristics of yang. It's an activating. Whereas the yin is an organizing and a completing. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, sorry, I didn't intend for that to turn into like.
No, it was great. It was
Okay,
wonderful.
good. Because it's allegorical. If you
Mm-hmm.
because you can look at this across human history, even when we started agrarian societies, right? You had a seed, and it's just one little thing, but then you stuck it into the ground, and suddenly you end up with corn and more seeds, so that you can stick those back in the
Mm-hmm.
ground. Again, allegorically, you look at that and you go, okay, well, I've got an initiatory, not initiatory, initiating principle that I'm going to stick in the completing principle. Hoocha, hoocha, hoocha. We're going to make it through the winter.
Right.
So
Right. Well, since you mentioned seeds, let me, if I could take a moment and
please,
just explain for your audience the meaning of that symbol, that round Tai Chi
yes,
symbol,
love to hear it.
since you mentioned seed. So the it's usually white and black, and then you notice that in the white there is a circle of black, and in the black there's a circle of white.
Yes, yes.
So those circles are considered the seeds of the other.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
in yin, you have the seed of yang, and in yang, you have the seed of yin. And so the seed, just like your example of corn, if you put it in the ground, it will open and it will blossom, and eventually yin will take over yang, and
Mm.
yang will take over yin. And so the symbol of the Tai Chi simply means that all of life is cyclical, that day turns to night, that night turns to day, winter turns to summer. But what a lot of folks miss in that symbolism is that life's cycles are also that way. Good times always turn to bad times,
Mm.
and bad times always turn to good times. And the proof of that is if you look back at your life, you've had good times and bad times,
Of
and they've
course.
never lasted, and they've never lasted. They
Right.
always change.
Right.
And so that's why the I Ching, which the translation of the I Ching is the classical book. Ching is classical book, and I is changes. So it's the
Okay.
classical book of changes. And it means that somewhere on this cycle is where you are at the moment, and how do you arrange your life in such a way as to be most effective. Um, the Chinese word for zenith, the symbol
Okay.
for zenith, which means the very, very top, are two symbols. One is something that's about to occur, and the other is the symbol for going down.
Oh, interesting.
And the symbol for nadir is about to go up.
Wow. I like that.
So, 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 so that gives you an idea of what that concept of Taoism is. That when things are going great, don't expect they're going to go like that forever, and at
Sure.
the same time put a little money in the bank.
Right.
Don't spend it all. Put a little money in the bank and reserve a little bit, because things are going to go down.
Yeah.
And when things are really bad, the idea is have faith and keep plugging, because things are going to change and get better.
Right. Right.
You know,
It. I
it
gotta
seems
tell
like a
you.
good way to live.
Oh, it certainly. Well, yes, of course. I mean, it's looking ahead, and then also accepting that there will always be good, there will always be bad. You
Always be
know,
bad. Mm-hmm.
it's fascinating to me too to hear you say all of this, because I'm looking at your story. Well, I'm not looking at it now, but I'm talking to you. That's good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And you were in the 1980s in Florida. I mean, it was a time when it was like, oh, we're never going to fall, right? I mean, it was, and now you're saying this. What a tremendous amount of learning that took. And by the way, I'm not trying to say that during the 1980s I was some enlightened being. I'm not there now, but it is a dramatic shift.
Well,
Don't
in the
diminish
80s,
this. It's huge.
yeah, in the 80s, Time magazine published a cover with the picture of the Miami skyline and the headline "Paradise Lost."
Oh, okay. Why?
Because those were the days. Well, those were the days of the Cocaine Cowboys and the
Okay.
Mario Boat Lift and
Okay.
Scarface and
Yeah,
Miami Vice and all that stuff. And I was there then, and I'll tell you, it was nuts.
I bet.
Miami really was nuts during those years.
I bet.
Uh,
But
if you see the movie Scarface,
I've
it's
seen
really
it.
how it was. It was
Oh
really
gosh.
how it
Like
was.
really, really? I was hoping that
Really,
was
really.
okay.
No, no, no. There were Cuban agents that circulated in Miami, and when uh, Jimmy Carter opened up the possibility of people going across the Florida Straits to Cuba to
Yeah.
get their relatives and bring them back, the Mariel boat lift. What Castro was doing at gunpoint was loading all of his mental institution
Oh gosh.
and criminals and forcing people to bring them back. And when they got here and when they got released on probation, asylum probation, there were Cuban agents giving them MAC 10s and
I had
setting them loose to rob and pillage in
I
it
didn't
was
know
crazy.
that. It sounds crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that's exemplary of what I was trying to say. I mean, we expect, well, always summer, and I
Hmm.
loved your explanation of the symbol. So, I'm bummed. I'm looking at the time. I don't know how this all that time elapsed, but the you have written, your recent book, I Am the Way. Um,
Hmm.
so this is so the I'm going to mess up your bridging wisdom across traditions is how you've
Hmm.
presented it. So this is I mean, like, tell me about this. How did you get to that point that you, because we've talked about great bits about Taoism, but this is a bridge between Taoism and Christianity.
So I told you a little bit about my first marriage. So we became divorced, life settled down, and I met my current wife, who happens to have been a Southern Baptist Bible literalist.
Okay.
Uh, so how did we come to meet and fall in love with each other? Because
Yeah.
she is she's a saint. She's just a wonderful human being. And where I was at the time now, after my transformation, I appreciated, how caring and loving and helpful she was to others. And so it was our values that we met on,
I
and we
see.
worked well together. I opened a little restaurant, and she managed it, and we were just like partners immediately. And but we couldn't talk about our belief systems because she thought mine was like really weird,
Sure.
and I couldn't buy the science of hers and the stories. Um, but when she started telling me, the life lessons that she would hear at church. I would think, well, that's just like chapter 32 of the Tao Te Ching, like what Lao Tzu said about this.
Sure.
So I started thinking, well, maybe I could help her to understand chapter 32 if I found something in the Bible that
Right.
reflected it.
Right.
So I
Sure.
would go searching, and I would find it, and then being somewhat of a poet myself, the challenge was to use now the Christian terms, the language. So instead of the Tao, I would say the Lord. Instead of God, I would say heaven. And but also, the Bible's Lao Tzu talks about humility all the time. The Bible talks about humility all the time. So it wasn't hard to find the biblical references that taught the same lesson.
Yeah.
Then the trick was to try to put it into the same cadence. So I worked with that, and then I would read it to her, and she goes, "Oh, I get it. Let me see that Tao thing. That Where did you get that from?" And I would show it to her, and then all of a sudden it wasn't weird to her because
Yeah.
she could
Yeah.
see that it was teaching the same thing. So piece by piece, I worked on it until all 81 chapters were translated,
It's fascinating.
and she read it, and what she said was, a lot of preachers have told me about sin, and they told me what I can do and what I can't do, and all of that. But nobody ever taught me Jesus the way this book teaches me Jesus. I feel like when I read this, now I understand who Jesus was.
Oh, wow.
And so and then by happenstance and luck, a publisher heard about the book and reached out to me, and it's been published.
Really? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So I will admit I have not read the book. Um, I'm God, I'm fascinated by that. It sounds what a phenomenal story that is. I You mentioned though you said uh, your wife read this and said, "Okay, it's not something I've heard before." I will get there. You go. Thank you for holding it up. I am the way.
I I could read you a passage if you want. But
Well,
what's
yeah,
nice about it
love
is
it.
that in the back of it, I have the Tao Te Ching
Oh
is
gosh. Okay.
is
Yeah.
there, so you can actually read the Tao Te Ching.
Do you know
Um,
you know what I find fascinating? First of all, just to
mhm.
say, right, Tao means the way, and I am the way is a Jesus quote. I saw that and I went, because at first I went, oh, nice Jesus quote, and then I went, oh
Oh wait,
wait,
so when I
yeah,
I'm going to show wait I'm going to show you something. Hold
okay,
on, just one
sure,
little
sure,
moment.
okay,
So I mentioned to you that the question of God was really nothing that was talked about in my family.
sure,
But when my dad died, I found in his book of his most treasured possessions this book.
okay. I'm not seeing it. Okay, all right. The Unknown Life of Jesus Christ. Okay, what is that one?
This book is written by a fellow by Notovich.
Hmm.
He was a Russian, who traveled in India, and he followed the
Oh,
path of
sure,
Jesus
sure.
through India during those years between 13 and 35, and he
Yeah.
followed him all the way up to Tibet, where he found scrolls that were translated by his
Yes.
translator,
Right.
which were some of Jesus's comments to the Tibetans. So um, I first of all thought it was just crazy that it was in my father's most treasured
Right.
possessions, and this is actually the 1857 original
Oh
printing
gosh.
with the
Wow.
canvas cover,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so I read it and I studied it and I looked at it, and there were actually two expeditions that followed his path
Hmm.
that confirmed that this is the case. And so I I'm of the opinion that Jesus was actually a Buddhist priest,
Oh, that is fascinating. For what it's worth.
because that's what he taught. He taught Buddhism,
Yeah, that's
love and
fascinating.
compassion and forgiveness and the like.
Do,
So
the
yeah,
the founder of Self Realization Fellowship, is that right? Paramahamsa
hmm,
Yogananda. That was
yeah, yeah, yeah,
that's his theory as well. That Jesus had traveled from
hmm,
Middle East
yeah.
into India in particular, because
Hmm.
Yogananda was
If you talk to anybody from India, they and you ask them, "Are you familiar with Saint Isa?"
okay,
And they say, "Well, of course. He was in India for 20 years."
sure,
Saint Isa is what they call Jesus, so
sure.
it's common knowledge. But of course, the Christian faith doesn't want to. It would kind of impact negatively their
Well,
ex- their
right.
their their exclusivity, our way or the highway. They
Well,
if they started to admit that there was another body of teaching
oh, of
that had
course.
something to do with it.
Well, and Abrahamic religions are unique in the demand for historical authenticity. Like, if you've rewritten something, as we know occurred in the fourth century, if you've rewritten these scriptures to use Son of God as a like actual deity, as opposed to a guy who preached really great stuff,
Hmm.
yeah, you got to
Right.
rewrite now at that point, what, 1600 years worth of the last history? Because it's like, why do we go do the crusades? Why do we do this? Why were people burned at the stake in Europe and
Hmm.
in the United States? So you can see I'm passionate about this, but I so
Yes.
it's interesting because I mean, you saw I wrote down a question in the notes there. There are likely people, I've got to imagine there are people who have reached out to you and said, "You're going to hell. Like, what the hell are you doing? You can't." Well, that came out weird, but say, "What are you doing? Christianity is right without you redoing other stuff as it." I mean, you're bringing in divination. That could be,
Hmm.
witchcraft. I mean, there's a lot of things. I'm going to stop talking
Yeah,
because
yeah, 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 yeah,
presumably you fielded the question before. So what? Go ahead.
yeah. There's plenty of people that uh, are they complain about why other traditions feel like they have to try to translate Christianity.
Sure.
Christianity stands on all kinds of there are a lot of objections to it.
Yeah.
Uh, you
Okay.
know,
We'll
it,
leave it at that. That's
it's
cool.
okay. I'd leave it at yeah.
I'm curious. You haven't received like actual threats, have you, from people?
No,
No. Okay.
no,
Good. Good. All right.
no.
Neither have I, by the way. So I don't know. I mean, the two of us, and at least we're batting 1,000 with not getting death threats. You know what that means, though. Now somebody's
What's
like,
that?
"Oh, dang, you haven't." They're going to send something to both of us.
Right. I think that
Thanks,
they're
fellas.
happy that burn it. Yeah, I think that they're just happy I'm going to burn in hell for all of eternity. So.
Yeah, yeah. If only it could just be, listen, I'm happy you're going to burn in hell, as opposed to, before you burn in hell, I'm going to make your life just as bad on earth. I wish they could have just leave me
Mm,
alone. It's cool, but
right, right.
um, I think that was great. What what a phenomenal point. You were going to read something though. Do you mind? Do you still want to
Oh,
do it?
sure, sure, sure,
I'd
sure,
love
sure.
to hear it. Now I got to buy the book because now I'm fascinated. This is going to be great.
Well, like
I
the
mentioned.
first,
So I mentioned to Bob
yeah,
earlier. I have read Tao Te Ching, but I have not read his book. So this will be a great. This will be great.
so the first chapter of the Tao Te Ching and of my book are almost identical, but they do show you how similar the Genesis and this first chapter is.
Yeah.
This is how the Tao. This is how the Tao starts in chapter one. The Tao that can be described is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be spoken is not the eternal name. The nameless is the boundary of heaven and earth. The named is the mother of creation. Freed from desire, you can see the hidden mystery. By having desire, you can only see what is visibly real. Yet mystery and reality emerge from the same source. This source is called darkness. Darkness on from darkness, the beginning of all understanding. Now, for the Western mind, that's packed full of stuff and it needs some unpacking.
Yes.
And even even if you read the Tao Te Ching for the first time, you'll look at that and go, "What? What?" Of course, as we understand Taoism and the principles of Taoism, it becomes abundantly clear. And since I had the pleasure of studying this under a Taoist master, I had a clearer understanding of what it is. But when I put it into Christian terms, this is what it sounds like.
Okay.
The God that can be described is not the true God. The name that can be spoken is not the name of God. God is unnameable, the origin. Naming God is the beginning of religion. Let go and you find God. Holding on, you see the creation. The unnameable and the creation are ultimately the same. Their source cannot be known. All that can be known is that I am, is. In the beginning, there was emptiness, emptiness, then creation. Thus, the mystery from which all wonders arise.
I gotta tell you, having studied Kabbalah as well, and I'm no
Uh-huh.
Hebrew scholar, but having brought in
Mm-hmm.
there the Tetragrammaton. I'm sure there are some
Mm-hmm.
rabbis out there, but having brought in the Tetragrammaton, and I don't know how to pronounce it properly, but Ahia.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that was masterful. Is all I'm going to say. That was a beautiful rendition of what I think a lot of Genesis in Hebrew embodies. It was
Embodies.
masterful.
And I think that the Torah is the closest it is the closest thinking to Eastern thinking
Mm-hmm.
that Westerners have produced. I
Mm-hmm.
think that Judaism is very Buddhist. It's very Taoist.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about if I could just say this as well.
Please.
What what Christianity has is I always bemoan the fact that Jesus only taught for 3 years. Imagine if he had taught for 40 years like the Buddha did, what
Right.
that would have done.
Mm-hmm.
But Jesus is presented and he taught as an absolute model of unconditional love. And this is how, Jesus is presented as something that can open your heart. In the East, that doesn't exist. That's not there. There is no model to look at and say, this. I can understand what unconditional love is from a
Mm-hmm.
human perspective by looking at the life of this person and understanding it. But what they do say in the East is, well, we're not going to tell you what that's like, and we're not going to tell you what to believe in.
Right.
What we are going to tell you is this: you said about entering into practices that will cultivate generosity, compassion, wisdom, empathy, grace, gratitude. you practice those things and cultivate those things, and you will come to your own understanding of how the universe works. So here are the practices to gain the understanding, and here is the model with
Yeah.
which you can set your goals.
Mm-hmm.
And the two of them really work quite well together. And it's really unfortunate that there seems to be a sense of
Antagonism.
chauvinism,
Yeah.
in on each side, that my way's the right way, when they
Mm.
both actually complement each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to add my thought on that, that was one of Jesus's first messages. His bit about strong meat for men, milk for wee babes, milk for babes. That line there
Mm-hmm.
was spoken to rabbis, right? To say that your way is a bit too cerebral. I'm going to give a model. I'm
Mm-hmm.
translating here, obviously, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
extemporizing on that, extrapolating. That was the word. But that's the intent there, is to say that, okay, that's great. Like, you can give us Kabbalah all damn day, but like the idea of practices isn't practical enough. And so I love that you are bridging that. It really is beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
That's really great. Um, I am really, really upset that I've got. I mean, I want to take up all of your day, and we've spoken for more than an hour. This
Mm-hmm.
has just been a phenomenal conversation, and I am honored that you shared this much with me. Thank you. It's amazing. Oh, there's somebody in the
Well,
background.
I need to thank you for what you do, because you create the platform for people like me to be able to come and talk,
Well, thank you.
and thank you for the work that goes into that.
You're very welcome. See, together we work together. We're bridging. There you go. We'll all be bridges.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, let me go ahead and shut it down. I will say, first of all, thank you to all of our listeners. I am Amethyst Herrick. I've been speaking with the inimitable Bob Martin, and we've been talking about Taoism, yin and yang, and of course, bridging wisdom across traditions. So thank you again, Bob.